Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 221. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensational sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know. On this episode, we're going to be covering Hero Tomorrow. This is a very special bonus episode this week. This is something we had the opportunity to do a couple months ago. We interviewed the director, Ted Sikora, one of the directors, I should say, of Hero Tomorrow. And we had the opportunity to discuss the film, the creation of the film, the whole process of making an independent superhero movie in a day and age where we're seeing a lot of big-budget superhero movies and how this labor of love got put together. And it was really a neat interview. During the interview process, we found out that there was going to be a webcomic associated with Hero Tomorrow, and through our discussions, we decided that it was best to hold that interview until the webcomic came out, and Jim and I had a chance to do a segment about the webcomic as well. So this is a very special bonus episode. You're going to be getting our normal Raging Bullets episode on the weekend, like usual. Periodically, I'd like to do a little bit more of this kind of thing. It's not always possible because of time, but this was a great opportunity to kind of step outside of our usual hat and talk about something a little different, and to release to you something as a bonus show. And kind of it's a thank you from us to you guys for listening to the show, and just to give you something that's a little bit of a different flavor from what we normally do on the show. I want to thank ahead of time Ted Sikora for taking the time to join us to discuss the writing and the creation of Hero Tomorrow, and just to give us kind of this great overview of what it was like to work with the whole cast and crew and production team to put together this labor of love. It was very, very cool to be a part of this particular episode. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. DCBService.com is your pre-order source. We're close to the end of the month, which means new book time. With those listings come amazing deals, and DCB Service is definitely the source to check out all the deals you can get on those pre-orders. So thank you, DCBService.com, for your sponsorship. And over at InStockTrades.com, they are your trade paperback and hardcover source. If you're looking for a collected edition, that's your first stop. Orders of over $50 or more give you free shipping. So I want to remind everyone to check them out as well. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plotline, story twist, whatnot of the DVD and or comics we are reviewing in this show. So if we're going over something you haven't read and or watched, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Lastly, I want to remind everyone to check us out at the New York Comic Con. That's nycomiccon.com. We're going to be there this year. It's October 8th. Through the 10th, and it's going to be an amazing event, so please make sure to stop by and check us out at our booth. We love the New York Comic Con and would love to see you there. Joining us for this segment is from the film Hero Tomorrow, writer, director, producer, Ted Sikora. And Ted, welcome to Raging Bullets.
Oh, thank you very much, Sean, and thanks for having me on, guys.
Now, Ted, can you really quick, just for our listeners, give them a quick, just kind of a flavor for what is Hero Tomorrow for anybody that hasn't watched it? Because you guys were kind enough to send us a screener. I liked this so much that not only do I have the screener, I bought it off of iTunes because I wanted to watch it on my iPad. This is a film I've fallen in love with. So can you tell us a little bit, what is Hero Tomorrow?
Well, thank you very much. Hero Tomorrow is an independent film. We shot it in Cleveland, Ohio, all around Northeast Ohio, really. And it's basically a story about a guy who has an idea for a superhero. And, you know, he's trying to sell it to publishers. This is some of the just intro stuff that happens very quickly in the film. Nobody really wants to bite on it. His hero is called Apama. And the theme behind Apama is so many great superheroes are based on creatures of nature. You know, you got Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Black Canary, whatever it is. There's always this nature theme, and like he sort of thinks like, well, all the good animals have sort of been taken, or what if there was this other animal that was just so powerful and stealth that it was never discovered by modern man? So his guy is based on the Apama, this other kind of animal. So it's a really tough sell for him, and it's kind of it's where we hope some of the humor comes from. That like, well, what the hell's an Apama? So his girlfriend, taking pity on him, makes him a costume of his own character for Halloween. And her name in the movie is Robin, played by Jocelyn Rozak. Our David is played by Karen Henderson. Once he has this costume and his life starts to go to pot, he kind of goes a little nuts and starts thinking he's a superhero and you know, living in a barn and doing weird things. So chaos ensues from that point.
I liked the reality that there was so much of this film that was about, we've all been at that point where we're at that transition period of our life where we think we're going in one direction, people are telling us to go in another direction, and then society's telling you should be over here. And I loved that, like, right away, because that's one of the things I love about reading comic books and following the whole genre in general. And I think when comic films work, they nail the human element of the characters. The ones that don't are the ones where that's kind of lost, that part where you can connect with the character. And that's one of the things that I really loved about David and Robin from the get-go, was the fact that they felt very human. There was a vulnerability about them. There was a strength about them. And there was things I could connect with. I remember times in my life, I'm a school teacher now. I remember before I was a teacher, when I was trying to figure out what do I want to do with myself, I was in a place like David was in. And we've all been there on some level, and I really liked that. Was when you guys were creating this and writing the script, was that something you set out with from the get-go, or as you got to know David, was that something that came out? How did David's development come about when you guys were writing this?
We really, took the sort of, I know you guys are DC based, so I have to tread on ice here. But I was a big Spider-Man fan growing up. Peter Parker, for instance. I just always loved the humanness of that character. That he just felt such a connection. And a lot of our motivation was like, how far can we really push this humanness? Could this be the guy who's living right next door to you, putting on a costume and going out and doing things? And we. At the outset, we said you have to, at every scene, every rewrite, whatever we did, the audience has to believe that this guy would do this. And, so we were really cognizant of that. The movie really could have fallen apart if people didn't believe that. So I think that's where that human factor hopefully comes from. It's just a lot of prep, and then a lot of it came from those actors. David and Perrin and Robin. I think they brought a lot to it that wasn't even on the page. So I'm really glad you picked up on that, and we did work hard to make that a theme.
Yeah, I gotta really just compliment you on the casting, because both David and Robin, really just, these were people that I could have swore I've seen at cons before. Just they had that personality and just that mindset that it fits who they were. And there was never a point in time when I was watching a movie that I really was like taken out of it, and I never saw an actor. I saw these two people that I could very easily, meet at New York Comic Con or in Chicago or any type of place like that. That was something that really impressed me with not only their portrayal, but also the story behind it. And that's something you just got to give you really props and compliments on, because that was very realistic.
Oh, thank you much. And if I could explain a little bit about what I liked so much about and what they brought to the role. Like David, or Perrin Henderson, we never imagined that Palma would have dreadlocks, for instance, but like talent pool for actors in Cleveland is, it's a lot thinner than some of the bigger markets. So we did spend a lot of time auditioning, and I first was referred to Perrin by a Cleveland Public Theater connection. And they said, this guy might work out for you, but he's got dreadlocks. And I thought, well, with the earthiness of this Palma character, that might really work. And now, it's hard to imagine it without, because it became part of the costume. And he just had this, he has a different kind of geeky flavor, I think, because of that. And then with Jocelyn, that was a really tough role because, how many females look like they belong in a comic shop? There's not a lot, And she had this way. When I scanned the room at the auditions, we probably had, a couple hundred people that first day. And, I just went down to take a peek at who was coming. And I locked on her instantly, like, boy, she's got the look. I really hope she can act. And she did. So, thank you. Thank you again.
One thing I really liked about her was she had this like street smart sexiness about her too, where it was like you could believe in the comic shop that she could hold her own, she knew her stuff, and she wasn't going to take any nonsense from anybody. And one of the things besides the casting of the two leads, I really loved the various supporting cast members throughout the film, because to me, Robin the strength of Robin is you get to see how strong she is when she's reacting to realistic situations that she would have to deal with in a comic shop. And if the patrons aren't delivering that to her, it's just not going to work. So really everybody was hitting on full thrusters. And Larry, the comic shop owner, I was like totally engaged in this. It was funny when I watched the DVD extras and I was seeing that the Hero Tomorrow shop was something that you guys actually created for the film. If I hadn't seen that and I was told, I would have gone looking for the shop to see if there was a place for it, because it was so laid out like a comic shop would be. I've been to comic shops that look like that. Mr. Cards and Comics, I know, is one that's on Mayfield Road by me that has similar racks. I mean, where they were used on the wall. It was the bookshelf style where everything's kind of flat and you can kind of see everything on display there. Right. The layout of the whole place was very similar to what that shop looks like in certain elements. I was totally floored to the amount of product that you had in there. And I thought it was great that so many comic companies had come forward and comic creators had come forward to support you guys on this, because the whole atmosphere and mood of that place, it felt, I was totally floored. I thought it was a comic shop.
The big challenge with that was we grew up reading Marvel and DC comics, for the most part. And Milo and I, Milo was the co-writer, co-producer, and Milo Miller is his name. And so we always assumed we were going to have it full of these things that we loved. And when we got a hold of both Marvel and DC, they would not allow us to show their product. That's really hard. How do you show a comic shop without showing those things? And Tony Isabella, another, Ohio connection, comic book writer, I sent a message to him just saying, we're trying to put this movie together. I used to go to Cosmic Comics downtown. Did you guys know that store?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I sent him a message just saying, I really love that shop. And by the way, do you have any comics, any properties that you own that we could show in our movie? And he took this letter and forwarded it to just so many people in the comic book industry. And we got all these boxes and boxes of comics showing up for the movie. And it was really, for an independent film like ours to have all these independent comics, it really felt right, and the music is very indie, and it ended up being one of those things that was a big hurdle, but I think it created this whole other atmosphere that I'm really happy kind of connected the way it did.
It's funny because you mentioned music. That was something else I really wanted to just compliment you on, how much the music fit into this story. And there's a couple scenes that it was visually, it was a really cool thing, but I think it was the music on top of what I was visually seeing that really took it for me. I was like, wow, that's really something neat. Now, when you were filming this, did you have what kind of music you were going to go to, or was that something you did after the filming, or how did that come about?
All forms of that. I used to be a mastering engineer, so for years I just worked with local bands, and I got to know a lot of groups that had these kind of lost gems. Maybe the band broke up, and they had some really good songs, and so a few of the tracks came that way. There was a notice put out when our film was first in production, and a company got a hold of us and said, we'd like to submit some work there. So other bands were presented that way. So the one band that really came through was the Sugarman 3 out of New York. They do that sort of funky, jazzy thing. So I think there's 4 songs from Sugarman 3. I love that the collectible atmosphere of jazz records and comics going together. I think it's such a timeless thing, and I was really careful not to put anything in that I felt was going to date the piece. And another guy, Neil Zaza, a guitar player extraordinaire, he helped do the score. Yeah, they just came from all sources, and it really, as far as Germany, a band called the Faz, France, there's a band in the credits called Sportocantest. This film took so long to make that it created a lot of opportunities to find new music. So we probably worked on this thing. We shot for a year, we did post-production for a year, and then it was in festivals for a couple years. And even changing during the festivals, like the film changed during the festivals quite a bit. So if we felt there was an opportunity to improve it, we did, and it almost never played the same way twice.
The scene, I call it the Robin conga line, when she's doing that kind of open, just free-form type of dance.
Oh, that was great.
That scene, I watched it, I was like, wow, this And it was just like this open, free expression. That was like one of those things with the music that was going along with her just, doing her thing. I thought that was just an absolute wonderful scene. And I got to know, was that just her improvisation? Was there, did you guys bring in anybody to help her choreograph it? How did that one play out?
That was all Jocelyn. And the craziest thing is, there was no music. I said, I don't know what we're going to have, so can you just, and I don't want to put music on and lose the footstep noise. Can you just kind of ad-lib something? And she had a background in dance a bit, so she just went for it. And it was like, that scene was out of the movie for every festival screening except the last one. And we just never felt like we could get the music to sync up right. And it was actually a scene I had to fight to get back in because it doesn't really move the plot forward. It is an expression of her at that time. And I said, for the DVD, I really want this back in. And I worked hard at finding a tune. And that was my wife, Diane, and our favorite band is the Faz out of Germany. And I had just had a really good real good stroke of luck with this band out of France. They were really eager to be in our film when I asked because it's an American film and they don't realize that it's maybe a smaller budget thing or whatever. So I thought, I'm going to hit up the Faz, our favorite band, and they were very open to it as well. So that's how that scene came to be. And it did get to show in Australia at the Fantastic Planet Film Festival. So that was it. It was added kind of for the DVD. So I'm really glad you liked it because there's some scenes in the movie that they don't move the plot forward, but I think they're important.
See, the thing that really also got to me on that scene was the fact that we have this kind of like release. I took it like she was just kind of like, just letting out whatever was in her that was like troubling her, and that was her like her venting, her escape kind of deal. And then the scene immediately after that, we get that Apama scene where I was like, and I thought that was just this great, how he had this great open da-da-da-da-da, kind of where she's going through, and then we had his next scene. I thought that for me was just this really cool transition from one to the other style going on, especially the one kind of metal band that you had in that scene, who's performing at I can't think of their name now.
Antiseptic.
Antiseptic, yeah.
I'm so remiss for not mentioning them when I talk about the music. They're physically in the movie, yeah.
Yeah, because it went from that one scene to Antiseptic, and there was such a dramatic change in the tone and just the area of the music. That was the thing that really sold me on those scenes, was just that whole dynamic going through. That was an amazing scene for me.
Oh, thanks. And that was a real challenge to edit because that was one of the reasons that scene was not in the movie, is because there just wasn't I think you could kind of jump into that scene okay, but leaving it was always sort of awkward. And it was only when I was starting to experiment with walking up the stairways, keeping that same piece of music going, that the scenes kind of folded their hands together. And by the time that music ended, we were ready to start the next scene and we had some expectation about the next scene coming. So it definitely helped as a transition to kind of overlap two scenes and keep that music rolling.
Throughout the movie, I felt like I was hanging with these people. I really felt like I was enjoying my time with them. I was getting to know them. And that's where every scene really worked for me, because the more the film went on, the more, I've seen this film now 3 times. And I'm going to keep watching it again, but I noticed one consistency every time I watched it. My focus was changed based on the character I just happened to connect with at a certain point in time in the film. Like this last time through, and I totally didn't expect this, Greg's dad, I was connecting with on some level. Because he started looking at David with his feet on the, walking through the kitchen, and I'm kind of like, David's really being rude. And I love David, but I want to smack David here. And that was one of the things that I really like about the film was, and it does go back to the great supporting cast as well, is that I think, when you've got these wonderful leads, and they've got wonderful people to play off of, you do see the film differently, and you see the characters as 3-dimensional. You see them from a different perspective. And it is when you're talking about friends, you have those moments where you can see somebody else's viewpoint of them. It may not be yours, but you can see them. And I've had this moment every time I've watched the film. I see David differently. I see Robin differently. And I love that about it. It's a very neat film to watch. And I do encourage anybody listening to this, if you've seen the film already, please watch it through again. And check that out, because it is something I think that just happens naturally with the film. You just kind of hook onto somebody else because maybe you're paying attention to them more because it's another time through and you're like, well, I wasn't really kind of watching what they were doing the last time I watched. And you do find yourself getting hooked into a different viewpoint. And I loved that. It came alive that way.
And Pat Milo was the story behind that actor, Greg's father, was a guy who... My wife and I were buying a Christmas tree several years back, and I was trying to fit it in my Cavalier, and there was just no way it was going to fit. And the guy pulls up next to us and says, "How far does this need to go?" And it was Pat, you know. So he just, real nice guy, just a kind of somewhat of a neighbor, but just dropped it off, and he started doing these impressions of Mr. Magoo, and so he really wants to get into acting. So he had done some more like opera singing kind of things, but this was his acting. Certainly film acting debut, as it was for most of the cast. Yeah, we just love him, and he's a sweetheart of a guy.
Well, he had a great intro in the movie, just with him in his basement. They got the "If You Love Me, Hang a Pierogi in the Window" polka playing in the background. I was sitting there, I was reading like, I'm watching this thing going, yeah, okay, this guy is, I understood who he was. Heck, he could be a family member of mine.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, my father was really into trains, so that was a bit of, we were using all of his trains in the place where he had his trains. And the song was parents had this friend, Jim Viros, who had a band, and that was an original of theirs, that one of those lost gems. I mean, he hadn't done anything with that song for probably 20 years, and I always liked it, and I thought, man, this would be perfect to kind of work it in. So we're going to try to get that for sale on iTunes. See if we can make that a wedding classic or something.
I can see it being the case, too.
You can't get married in my family without playing a polka. There's at least one or two polkas being played, and it's next time we have a Seguin family wedding, I'm getting my hands on that. We got to play it.
All right. I'll get you a copy. I'll shoot an MP3 to you.
Cool.
That's cool. When you were talking about David's dreadlocks, and I remember that was something from the DVD extras talking about how that was something that changed. That actually, it's funny. It didn't dawn on me until I started watching it again a couple of times. This really changed the whole entire look of the main character. I'm talking about Apama, because typically you think of, that I identify Apama now as a character. And I know this is going into a comic book, which it's funny. The comic book is going to be, is the comic book supposed to be the work that David was working on, or are you guys just doing an offshoot story? I know it's going to be separate from the film, so you can read it independently. So for anybody listening, when you pick up the comic book, it's great because the comic's an independent piece, but then thematically it'll obviously connect with the theme of who Apama is. Going forward, it really is going to the actor's stamp on that.
The idea of the comic spawned from a guy named Chris Yambar, who's an independent comic guy out of Youngstown. He was one of these people that met us through Tony Isabella and gave us a lot of really good comics to show in the store. And he said, "Have you ever thought about doing a comic book version of the movie?" And generally, I tend to think of movie adaptations in comic book form. They usually fall pretty flat. Comics are better than movies anyway, for my money. But then when you take a movie and do the comic book version, that usually doesn't work. So I didn't think too much of it. But then he did plant that seed, and then we started thinking, what if it was the book that was in David's head, and it is Apama, and the main character is not David. It's this guy named Ilya Zharsky. He's a Hungarian gentleman, and he's got a love interest who's based on Robin, but it's not Robin. He goes through all the things David describes about his character. He finds this scroll that reveals a position you need to assume to become Apama. It's been so much fun, and it's been a lot more fun in some ways than making a movie, because it's just, as a writer, it's so liberating. Like whatever you can dream up, if it works for the story, it can go onto the page, versus thinking about the budget of shooting that scene where you can't possibly work all these effects in and what have you. So we've hired an artist out of Spain named Benito Gallego, and I just can't wait for people to see this stuff, because he's got a real retro look. A huge fan of John Buscema, and I love the sort of timelessness of his work. I mean, when you see it, it'll be very reminiscent of that 70s style. And that's what, Milo and I, we grew up on that, and So we're really trying to do something that sort of takes that 70s flavor and just kind of turns a different direction in the way it evolved. So nothing against the comics of today. I think they're fantastic, but there is, when you started reading comics, however old you are, I think that's the golden place in your heart. That's what we're trying to reconnect with.
I grew up in the 70s. The 70s comics for me totally connect. Both Marvel and DC. I mean, those were my loves growing up as a kid. And it is funny how many of the 70s elements now, because a lot of the creators that are in comics now are coming back into the comics. Yeah, they're being reimagined for today to be more of a today storytelling, but you can tell so much so that they've got deep roots in what we found cool in the 70s and art styles and nods back to that. And I love it that it's kind of coming back around like this, because I'm gonna, when you were mentioning Benito Gallego, am I pronouncing it right?
I think it's Gallego, but I may be pronouncing it wrong.
No, looking at the spelling, I think you're right. Gallego.
It is a G, but I think it's Gallego.
The reason why I'm mentioning it is I've got a link that it'll be going into our show notes. Go to the website to see some of his work, because it's stunning. I was looking before at certain images that he did of characters like Conan and then landscape sequences and things like that. It's really, I totally get why you went with this artist. It's stunning.
Well, and we put an ad out on a site called conceptart.org. We got submissions of over 100 artists from all over the world. I was so blown away. I never expected this. And he was our absolute first choice. Luckily, it was months later when we got back to people and he was available, and we were just like, oh man, this is great. So issue 1 is very close to completed. I'm actually doing the coloring and lettering, and Benito's taking on some of the coloring, because there is sort of like a flashback sequence, and so that can have a different look. But the script for issue 2 is coming together now, and we're thinking like late June this will be up. And the thing is, it's going to be an online comic to start, so it'll be downloadable. The whole issue will be, just something you can go and read for free.
That'll be perfect. We'll make sure to announce on our show when it's released, because it looks like it's in June. Is that what I'm saying?
I'd like that to be the case. It's kind of nice, it's just straight from us to the reader. There's no publisher cranking down on us for deadlines, which is a good and bad thing. But I can say, without a doubt, it'll be done in July, but we're hoping for late June.
We'll make sure to announce it right on the show when it comes out. Thematically, this story of Apama, the whole character concept, right from it, you know what got me really sold on it? I remember the first time watching the film, I was so into watching David drawing and working on the character, because he got into this like almost animal-like
pose. Yeah.
Was that conscious? Was that part of the script, or was that something that the actor did? How did that come about? Because when I was watching him, because then it goes into this sequence of him, as he's drawing, we start to see him kind of shifting into imagining this coming to life, and then, so that he could visualize it to put it on the page. But I loved watching him draw, and I was so curious as to where that came from when he was like kind of squatting up there on the top of the chair, like he was on a perch.
I'm going to say that was probably a Perrin ad-lib, because I remember that scene. Again, we were first-time filmmakers, and the scene that was sort of the flashback was, in our initial script, it was never intended as a morphing out of this comic book thing. It was just sort of an imagination daydream moment. But I think it just didn't feel like it transitioned in the film very well. So after the film was shot, we went back and did this sort of drawing this comic book scene into the imagination. So I don't think that was one that was really storyboarded, where a lot of the film was. So I think we got him in there, and it's probably something Perrin just jumped up on the chair like that, thinking about his character. It became the thing that kind of went on the cover of the box, that sort of the way he's sitting there.
I loved it, because that to me shows that the actor really connected with the character and who the character was when they start doing things that, like, they start feeling like, oh, this feels right for who this character is. Because that role came to life for me. It really did. And I thought it was something, his being an artist and the way Robin was an artist with her clothing design and things like that, that to me, it showed so well why she connected with him and why she supported him, even when it was difficult to, because she got him. because of her own quest to try and make it and her end of it. And I thought it was so neat to see them as a couple, because I'm like, okay, this is totally believable to me. She's not so out there and away from what he's doing that she wouldn't get it. There's a hook. I love that she's working at a comic shop, and that was a hook into their relationship as well. But it was also that she herself was an artist. So she understood not only the element of being involved in comics, working at the shop and understanding comics and how they work clearly from her dialogue, but also the fact that she herself is creating something and has a passion for creating something. And the fact that she supported him by making the costume and those type of things, it was something I found immediately engaging about both characters, because they seemed to so just dive into the role and make them come to life. And I think it was the whole story and script and everything. It just gelled together.
Yeah, I feel very blessed over and over to have worked with the people we did on that. Yeah, and they did. The commitment from them in particular, and Brian Jalovec, who played Greg. You know, it was a year-long shoot where we were all working full time. So we were doing this, after hours, weekends, and we had over 40 locations. So it's very hard to get that kind of a commitment from an actor, and both of them were able to do that. And I'm, as I said, just feel blessed over and over to have this experience with these people.
One of the things I always dig about good movies as well as my comics is a nice layered story where you get a little piece here, then there's a little bit more, and it's that slow build where one piece builds on the next, builds on another. And that was something I really appreciated with this story, because we get a little bit out of each of the characters, and it was just a nice slow build that was just this great, gradual kind of thing that you really got. We keep saying how these guys, they felt so real and natural to us because of this build. And I'm just wondering, when you were creating this movie, did you go through with the full storyboard throughout it? Did you break it down? I'm wondering just the how-to process of just getting this laid out the way it did, because this really had a nice flow-through.
Milo and I spent 3 years on that script, and we never put any kind of deadline on ourselves, and we just said, someday we're going to make a movie, but we're two friends, we're just shooting a script back and forth until it's right. And then when we got it right, or what we felt was right, I had never shot anything like this before. So I took an entire year and storyboarded the whole movie, and it was like 1,500 images. And it was also the same year I was getting married. So, I was in no rush to plan a wedding and start shooting a movie. So storyboarding was really good for me. It really kind of taught me a lot about the scenes that we had written that, didn't have to have dialogue. So many opportunities arose from spending all the time drawing it, where I think things like those, the thing you mentioned with Carl where he's aggravated because David's walking by with his wet feet, like that kind of stuff, a lot of those moments came from storyboarding, because you just kind of visually have to realize some things without dialogue. And I think for first-time filmmakers, it's very easy to really write a lot of dialogue and make things extremely dialogue-driven. But I think that's one of the things that lets our film breathe a little bit, because of we did spend a lot of time planning sequences that don't need dialogue. And when you do it like that, it's really looking at it with a microscope, and it changed quite a bit throughout that whole process. And then, even though we did all that, when we finally went to edit it, things got shuffled all over the place for the reasons that, hopefully, or why you were responding to it that way. We realized that, certain scenes came too soon and made the arc a little strange. So, we started shuffling, and we went back and reshot scenes, new scenes, and so it's a really odd process we went through to get that movie from point A to where it is, point Z. But I don't know how I could ever even emulate it again, that process, because it took so long. From start to finish, we're talking like 7 or 8 years.
There's something actually I want to commend you guys on. The personal romantic moments in the film. It was so funny. I was really touched by these, and they felt different to me than they have in other films a lot of times. Because we see David and Robin together in a couple of very intimate moments. But I loved the way they were handled, because they were sweet, sexy, and vulnerable. In a weird way, they felt so much more natural. Because you see, like, David's slight awkward attempt at smooth banter and smooth moves and things like that. Yet I love that Robin rises up to the occasion, too, and kind of, where's your hand, and those type of moments. Everything felt like, it felt real to me. which a lot of times when you're watching films, it feels like you're watching these like gods and goddesses of the screen where you don't feel like you can connect with them on a personal level. I felt more like a voyeur in this one, like I was really watching somebody's bedroom. And I really mean that as a compliment, so totally. Was that hard to do? Like, I know you always hear in film that it's hard to pull together the romantic scenes. I'm talking about not just the moment when they were together at Robin's house, but also in the comic shop. I felt in both cases, you kept, there was a sexy romantic element to it, yet it felt vulnerable and human and the right amount of awkward for where they were at in their relationship. Was it hard to put that together? Because I thought it was beautifully handled.
Well, I think what Milo and I did, looking at past relationships and things, you try to draw from your own experiences and these kinds of things. And I think that's a lot of those things, even dialogue, some of that stuff happened to us, in different forms or whatever. So anything that I think you can really draw from an actual line that somebody has said to you or that, there's an honesty behind it to start, and now you just have to kind of create it. So, yeah, I think we did sort of look at, that came up a lot from our own experience, I think, in different, relationships we've had, perhaps over the years. My wife, she watches a movie and complains about certain lines because it's something that she said to me or whatever.
Cool.
So it's very personal, and I think it's important for people to put themselves out there in that way.
It was just a natural vibe, and I just thought, to me, I really wanted to make sure I noted that, because it was something in those two sequences I was like, whoa, that was really neat. I was moved in a way that I didn't expect, because I was so into David's story and Apama and Robin and where is that whole thing going to go, that I was surprised at just how much those particular intimate moments, and I think that is where I, again, started seeing these characters as three-dimensional. They became friends instead of these characters on the screen who I was, like, distant from. I became with them. These are people that I hang out with. I know. In many ways, I became defensive of them, too, when people were being busybodies around them, like family members and things like that. Because I'm like, I'm relating to the stresses that are being put on their lives by coworkers, or people like when Robin was at the fashion show and there were people talking about David and, where his direction and where he was going and all that. The stresses it was putting on their relationship felt very real. How they had to fib a little about their lives, so to speak. People do that. These were all natural things that I'm like, wow. And these stresses all, to me, played into both of their journeys throughout the film and where they end up going. And that's something for people out there, if you haven't seen this film and you want to see something that you can connect with, a very personal journey, we've all been in those bits of our lives because of the stresses that society puts on you, that people close to you put on you. Not that they're intentionally doing it. They do it with the best intentions and best interest. But it was something throughout this whole thing. I'm like, wow, is this just nailing, even if you didn't go through these exact experiences the way that they're laid out, you can connect with them because you have in another way. And that was something that I just felt it was a very human piece. And that comics for me, that's why I come back month after month, is the fact that when the right writers and the right artists are working on a character, they bring that to life. And great film does that as well. And in this case, it was something that I just thought you guys nailed, and I applaud that.
And again, I'll always go back to Perrin and Jocelyn, where, and Brian, I think there was room in the script for them to do some ad-libbing too. So a lot of, not just the, Milo and I as far as our experiences, but those two, I think, brought a lot to it and a lot of imagination to what these characters would be going through. And there were times when we would say, you know what, just forget the script and let's just play this scene from how you feel it, and so they would come up with a lot of gems doing it that way too.
Yeah, I was wondering, the dinner scene with the mom and daughter reaction. I've seen that happen in real life between my mom and my sister. That was, for me, I was like, oh my God, this is Mary and my mom right here going on. I thought that just the reactions, just the emotions, just everything that was playing out had just that, as again, we keep throwing out realistic, but that one just, I was laughing along with it because I was like, this is them. What the heck? Wow.
I'm really glad that connected with you in that way, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm also sorry to hear that at some level. But,
it's that whole, like, the, because in this, and actually the scene I'm thinking of in real life is one of the times my sister brought home one of her boyfriends. And anything mom and dad or any of us asked, my sister was kind of like on a defensive immediately, and mom was a little bit protective because this is the daughter. And you could see there's that whole protective nature of the mom, but also Robin Jocelyn, when she was thrown out, it was real emotional reaction where she didn't want to, it was that confliction going on between them, but it was like kind of a confliction out of love, which I thought was just a really cool stuff going on.
And that's another one that was very, based on something that actually happened. So it's, one of those things that's rooted in reality.
I'm laughing as he's saying this because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I must be like David or something, because I was connecting so much with parents' portrayal of this whole thing, because I must be the guy you don't want to bring home or something, because I so totally was relating to him, because it was great, because, I mean, and that's true. The first meeting with the parents of your significant other, whether you're dating them or, it goes to marriage or whatever, we've all been there more than once, where you meet that person and, you're there with your significant other, you want it to go well, you want them to like you because you know that it'll be good for you in the long run, and that's, like a major score and that type of thing. But then, it's how much is too far? How much of you do you really want them to know? Because once you throw yourself out there, it's like, if I say too much, have I revealed too much of who I am and now they won't like me anymore? Because there's that facade that you naturally put up in the beginning. And some of it's put on by you, some of it's put on by the significant other. That played out in that whole sequence. That was so great. And when you saw it start to drop, that's when the problems started. And that's what I loved, because I was rooting for David, because I'm like, oh, he's so totally portraying himself well, and he's confident in who he is and what he's doing here. And the mom seems to be getting that. I loved that whole bit because, the daughter getting defensive and everything. I was connecting with David in that sequence, not so totally, because I didn't have that perspective. It's a great example of what I said about this film earlier, though, and why I thought it was, when you were doing your rant, Jim, I thought it was important to note this. I do think a strength of this film is rewatchability and seeing it from a different perspective the next time you watch it through. You could be sitting in that table in a different spot the next time you watch it, because I am going to watch that sequence differently after your story and try to see that perspective of it. I love that about this film.
Oh, thank you again. And that scene in particular was the one that I think we circled. Like, this is probably the trickiest scene in the movie, because, the other scenes are, I can envision, I can storyboard all that, but if we don't get these performances right during this dinner scene, I mean, there is a lot of subtleties and things that just, the actors have to do it, and it's I can't, I keep saying it, but it's so important that these actors were so great and so willing to try different things. And Shelley Delaney, who played the mother, I thought she was just phenomenal and really just came on board for 2 days. She teaches at Athens University and came up to Cleveland for a couple of days to do her parts. It's like, gosh, we didn't get to rehearse much with her at all, so it just kind of, I think that was kind of good, though, because there was this awkwardness even with the actors because they didn't know each other. Somehow I think it just all worked.
One of the things that I want to commend is when David put on the costume, we got to see him move around as a Pama and actually do some act. I'm talking about specifically the outdoor sequences is what I was thinking about when he was doing his training as a Pama. I thought it was really great because, we're dealing in an era right now where we're seeing a lot of big budget superhero films. And I think for an independent film to pull off a believable character nowadays is very hard to do. And the believability of a Pama in those outdoor sequences with training, you've got to have a certain amount of awkwardness because it's David training himself. and I liked that. But I also felt at the same time that, David believed what he was doing. And that was a nice balance in the whole thing because I was watching and I'm like, he's really putting forth the effort. He really believes in what he's doing right now. And we're seeing him do that. Is it hard to shoot, thinking when you've got these comparisons to big budget films and things like that, did that come into it, or are you just kind of like, we've got to look at what we've got right now? And how did you guys do that? Because obviously there had to have been some elements of what have they done before with superhero films, and how do we do that? How did you guys approach that? Because it worked on so well, those sequences.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I guess we always knew we weren't trying to compete with Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman. This is like an art house movie, and it's got a lot of, and it's really a love story more than anything, but it's got this comic book sort of backdrop. For us, it's like our fights, we never felt like they had to be great fights, and they were going to be more realistic. Again, like typically a fight between two people, it's over pretty quick. It's not choreographed in karate, it's sort of, so we sort of took that approach, like when there's a punch, let's make sure we really get a good punch, and maybe one or two punches is the end of the fight. So, but with the training, that was a lot of, I think once Perrin got into that costume, he was kind of feeling it, and he was very much a guy who even before our movie would think nothing of going to a parking deck and just grabbing a grappling hook and a rope and climbing up, and he's one of these guys that's very adventurous. So it really was in his wheelhouse, I think, as far as what he would do.
And I guess one of the other things I wanted to ask about that is there was a lot of inside scenes. Is it hard to balance, especially nowadays, to try and do outdoors? Because I loved how seamlessly the outdoor sequences filled in with the indoor sequences. And they really felt like they were all part of the same film and the same production values and everything. How do you balance that out and make them fit so seamlessly? Because you guys really did a good job with that. Was it hard to transition between indoor shoots and outdoor shoots, is what I'm getting at?
The thing we always strived for, and I should also mention our crew. I mean, Milo, he was the co-writer, co-producer, but he was also, like assistant director. So he was there for almost all the shoots. And then my brother Kurt was the co-director of photography, Kurt Sikora. And then two of our other friends, Rob Sikora, who is not related, and Joe Robato. So none of us, really had any film experience. So you had truly 5 friends that made this movie. One thing I had learned about shooting with this particular camera, the Panasonic SDX 900, was that when I shot in sunlight, it looked very kind of video-y, bright sun. So I was really liking the gray days, and being in Cleveland, we get plenty of those. So that was really a great thing, and I think that's why it doesn't tend to get sort of it has a sort of even look, and I think the grayness, there's sort of almost like a comic book flatness to it that I really like, and I think that was one of the things that kept that look kind of consistent, because we didn't have a lot of experience. And then I did learn a lot in the editing process about color correction and making things kind of look equal and treating scenes to have a different flavor and feel. A lot of that had to do with just, being in Cleveland and having kind of even gray days.
I love that it's great to shoot in Cleveland because it's always inside. No, and I'm totally joking, but I thought I was laughing as we were kind of going through that. But it makes sense because you start dealing with not even just that, a fluctuation in weather becomes if you're shooting on different days, it's how do you make continuity between those scenes if the days aren't consistent with when you were shooting last time. And there was a definite continuity throughout the film. There was nothing where I was like, wow, bam, that just feels so totally out of where we were at. Throughout the entire film, inside, outside, it all had a very nice flow of feeling like it was in the same time and its own place. And I love that it didn't feel like it was one set time or place. It didn't matter in the case of this story. It was just that it was like its own real time.
Yeah. I mean, because of the Halloween party, maybe we're more around fall, but even further than that, it's like what year it takes place. We try to be very obscure about that, sort of not use anything that was real tech savvy. So it wasn't like you'd look at a prop and go, well, actually, you'd probably go back a few years now because we do have some like CRT monitors things in it, but we tried to, again, as I said with the music, to keep it so that it would be sort of not a dated film.
It's funny, you mentioned with the Halloween party, you had the belly dancing troupe on there, that troupe Shabana, which, and it's funny because my sister actually, took lessons with that troupe. So,
cool.
So I was watching and I'm like, wait a minute, I think that's my sister's troupe. And I'm watching, and then sure enough, when the credits roll through, I'm like, oh my God, that is them. That was kind of a neat little, thing that I noticed. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
And that was another thing from the woman who played the mother, Shelley Delaney. Her niece, she knew we were doing this Halloween party scene, and she said, my niece is in this band troupe, this belly dance troupe, and would you want a troupe like that at the Halloween party? And we're like, oh my God, yes. So it was never written into the script either. It was just something that came from a referral of Shelley.
Well, that's cool. The other thing about that Halloween party, that was just one of those great comedic moments in this movie that the couple different stuff that happened there, it was something that it was needed to be done, and it was nice. I was laughing, but then you get this great development between David and Robin, where with their dealings and what happens between them after the party. So you had this very funny couple moments. You're like laughing, and all of a sudden, bam! Like, oh, nice setup.
The house was actually my father-in-law's house, Ron Davis, and he has one of these old mansions on Euclid. One of the ones that wasn't actually destroyed when they rebuilt Cleveland. So we're really fortunate to kind of get all these people there. We put an ad out on something called the Neopal. And are you guys familiar with that at all? Or
No, I haven't.
No.
It's for actors around this region, and all the audition notices go to it. So it's like a digest that you get every day of any kind of audition or anything to do with acting and that kind of work. So we put a thing out saying we were having this Halloween party scene in a movie, and if anybody has a really cool costume and would like to be in an extra, just kind of show up. So it was really sort of neat for us because people just kept showing up in these awesome costumes, and we're like, it just adds this production value that was really immense for us. We had a very modest budget on the movie, somewhere around $100,000, and $40,000 of that was actually our camera package. For people to come and just sort of donate their time and be part of this scene, we actually did. It was like a full day. It was all shot in one day, and we actually threw a party. So we had, in between takes, everybody was kind of just hanging out and eating and drinking, and then we'd say, all right, everybody, we got to settle down, get back into the next scene and shoot for 10, 15 minutes, set up the next scene while everybody relaxes and chills. So it was probably I think it was a pretty fun shoot for everybody but us. We went to like 4 a.m.
I love that there's this like community aspect when it comes to making an independent film, because you just voiced one of the major challenges of what you guys did. You had a $100,000 budget, and if $40,000 of it's already eaten up by the camera package, that doesn't leave you a lot of money to work with as far as for putting together a whole film. And that's really incredible that you were able to pull in that kind of support. Were there other challenges? Obviously, besides the obvious financial ones, were there other challenges to putting together a film like this?
This film kind of changed my career, because I was an audio engineer when it started, and now I shoot and direct. So, I think at every element, whether it be writing, storyboarding, casting, everything was a challenge for us. Finding the right camera. We bought another camera prior to that that we just didn't feel like was going to work. So, it was a lot of experimenting and setting up that comic shop. And, honestly, there's probably 40 versions of this movie out there because of all the different edits that were submitted to different festivals and played at different festivals. So, it's just so many challenges. And then working film festivals, that's even a whole other element that, you finish a movie and you think, now it can coast, but then you've really got to push it, and you got to try to get into festivals. And it was really just labor intensive on so many ways, but it was so rewarding too. So, and as I said, now because of that film, I'm doing a lot of different things creatively with my career. A long answer to a simple question is challenging all the way down the line.
How do you keep yourself going in that type of thing? I'm sure there's a different answer from everybody who worked on the film, but how do you keep yourself going? Because when you're talking about working till 4 a.m, on that particular scene, that becomes, one of those things where it's like, you've got to find that something, and probably a lot of different somethings that keep you going and draw you like some inspiration to keep moving. What were the things that kept you, or what was the thing that kept you going? Because a lot of times, I'm sure there's projects like this that are started that don't get completed. and people don't have the opportunity to then enjoy the fruits of the labor. In this case, we're fortunate because we can actually talk about this wonderful film because it's been completed. What was it that kept you guys going?
Well, I think there was a belief that we had something that was worth finishing and seeing through, and the alternative is for us is like, all right, well, maybe when that first cut was done and it had a lot of problems, I think at that point you would lose a handful of people that might have said, well, we tried, let's do another project. I would much rather really see this one through its full potential, no matter how long it takes, than to just start over, because you're not really building on anything. We're just starting almost from, if you made a movie that's just so-so or whatever, that's cool, but did you really get it as great as it could be or as good as it could be? I think we always believed that we could get this to some other level, and that's why there was so much tinkering. And the 4 in the mornings happened with festival submissions too, because you're trying to get to a deadline of a film fest, so you're trying to get a new cut done, and you stay up really late working on those edits. That kind of thing happened quite a bit. One of the things we've always said with this project is it's got to be a positive for anyone who comes to know it. And that goes from cast and crew to audience to anybody. If somebody's letting us use their location for the movie, I want that to be a positive experience for them. So if I don't finish this thing to its full potential, then I'm not holding my end of the bargain, really is how I looked at it.
Ted, let's talk to people about how to get the film. I know there's HeroTomorrow.com, which is a site that I've been visiting to get more information on it. Tell people how to get the film, though.
Well, it's right there where you said it, at HeroTomorrow.com. We have a link right on the front page, to buy the DVD, and it takes you to Film Baby, which is a great resource for independent filmmakers. Film Baby is a lot like CD Baby is for bands, so they kind of distribute their order fulfillment for us. It's available other places. You can buy it other places, but I think Film Baby is the best price. So you could buy it on Amazon, but we prefer Film Baby, and it's a much it's cheaper. So buy it at Film Baby or iTunes, as you mentioned. I'm curious, how does it look on the iPad? Like, is it bright enough and all that?
It was so crisp and clean. It was great.
Okay, cool. I was concerned. Like, you never know with that's one of these other challenges. It's like when you make a copy, like, oh gosh, for film festivals, you send them a screener, you go to the festival, and it's like maybe it shows a little too dark or too bright. And I was more worried about the iTunes, an iPad. Is it going to be like really dark or something? But
no, honestly, I watched it with in the lunchroom. I get a half an hour for my lunchtime where, it's the kids are eating their lunch, and so I'm eating the lunchroom. And I was sitting there with 2 other teachers, and we watched it in half-hour segments. So we watched it over a 3-day stretch on that particular viewing. And I wasn't intending on doing it that way. It was literally I was going to watch it at my lunch and then that evening go back home and watch the rest of it myself. But they got into it, and they said, oh, can we watch this with you tomorrow? I'm like, all right, well, we'll bring it in. And so 3 of us sitting around my iPad watching this each day. So I left it where I left off at, and I would brought it in the next day, and we were all watching it. So, I think that actually, for them not having seen it before, answers a lot of questions about the quality of the watchability to someone who hasn't seen the DVD before. It evidently works quite well.
Cool.
Making an independent film, how did you guys handle distribution of your film?
Well, we had a sales agent who did shop the film around, and we got a couple offers, but they were, they weren't really good offers. And I'd gone to enough festivals and talked to a bunch of filmmakers that had just had horror stories about their deals, to the case where sometimes movies, you sell your movie to a distributor, but then they don't put it out, and you just kind of, you sort of just gave your movie away, and it'll not even be seen, that kind of thing. So that happens. That scared us a lot. So when we looked at the deals in front of us, we just thought, these don't seem like they're paying anything really, and we're just kind of giving it away. So with the comic book thing we had coming out, we decided that let's just keep everything ourselves and try to do this on our own. So that's why Film Baby is so great. It's very easy for a filmmaker to get into and sell their product there. But it's on you to market it. We have to draw interest to the movie ourselves. So that's the new challenge. And we were one of the first films, though, that actually get a deal on iTunes without a traditional distributor. that's something that I think is going to be a future pathway for filmmakers to do more of these kinds of deals. And you know, when we sell something on iTunes, we're getting a really nice percentage of that, which is, you know, never used to be the case. And it certainly wouldn't have been the case if we had gone with one of these other distributors. So for us, it's great if people go to either Film Baby or to iTunes. We really are so grateful for any support we get. Wouldn't hesitate to direct them to either site.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned about the film that you would like to get out there?
Gosh, no, I think you guys were really thorough, and I'm really grateful for the amount of time you put into it and analyzing it as well. So, I mean, it's truly an honor. Thank you very much.
One quick thing, and I'm not going to spoil this scene, but I have to tell you how much I absolutely loved the cowboy at the end. I thought that I howled out loud with that scene.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that was Milo wrote that one on some personal experiences that we had heard about. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it's probably best to not.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil that.
Actually, you know what though? That scene's online. So if you go to YouTube and type in Hero Tomorrow, you can actually see the Hero Tomorrow cowboy scene. So yeah, we kind of welcome people to just check that scene out.
I want to thank you, Ted. I appreciate you. I appreciate the film. I appreciate what all of you working together put together in putting together Hero Tomorrow, because it was just such a great film that I think has a diverse audience base to it. I wish you guys much success. And I want to thank you for your amount of time, because you really gave us a lot more time than I was even hoping for. And it was great to be able to talk with you about really just some of the cool themes that are in this film, because it was a special movie.
Sean and Jim, I want to thank you both very much. This was a lot of fun for me, and tuned in. And let's hopefully do this again sometime, maybe when we get the comic book up and running after a couple issues.
Jim, I wanted to talk about Hero Tomorrow #1. The first comic is up on the website, and I really enjoyed this, because when I saw the film and I heard they were making a comic, I wasn't sure if the comic was going to be a continuation of the elements that happened in the film, or if it was going to be something else. And I actually love the idea of the comic being David's from the film coming to life.
Oh, definitely.
You can enjoy the comic without seeing the film. And I recommend the film as a companion piece to this. So if you're reading the comic online right now, and I do recommend before listening to this, read that comic, because you can read it online and follow along with us. It's at herotomorrow.com. It's written by Miller and Sikora, who wrote the original film. It's illustrated by Benito, and apologies for any name butchery. It's Gallego, Gallego, whose art really suits this book. And like I said, it can be read on herotomorrow.com for free. And there's links on our website and in the show notes to this. But it's an interesting comic book. Jim, what did you think about... I want to talk about the web interface before we go any further. It took me a few seconds to get used to how moving around works with the zoom feature and stuff like that. But I highly recommend doing this while reading to enjoy the art presentation, because I did find myself zooming in to try to get more of a flavor for what was going on in the issue. But there's some really nice details presented here in this issue, and I really loved that feature being present. How did you feel about the web interface? Because web comics, I know, every site you go to is a little bit different. What did you feel about the interface?
Here's the thing. Of the two of us, I am the techno idiot. You know, while you're the more techno geek and you're more comfortable with that environment. So I was like, okay, webcomic. I'm like, all right, let me get ready for this. I jumped right into it, and I thought it was really cool. I really got, the groove going. It was just something that, I flowed right into, and I really liked zooming in. I flip the page, zoom in, and then go through. Oh yeah, and I was finding I was reading pages like 2 or 3 times, just looking at it, going, oh cool. I read it a lot slower than what I normally read, but I tell you, I enjoyed it. Yeah.
After a few pages, I found that the interface was very intuitive and very easy to use. It just took me, there's a little bit of a quick learning curve just to get used to that particular interface. But I'm looking forward to reading future issues using the same interface. The basic premise is that the lead character, Ilya, pronunciation, I'm not sure on that. Is that
probably
takes on the characteristics and traits of a previously undiscovered animal known as a pama. And I'm a sucker for a hard luck story. We've all been at points in our life where everything just seems to go wrong, and I totally get this vibe from Ilya, and that's what it is. We've all had that era in our lives, usually more than once in our life. The initial kickoff sees him trying to get in the right form, pose, to channel, if that's the right word, a pama. Imagine knowing this was possible. I think as comic fans, we'd all try it. This is a chance to gain powers that could make him a superhero. Heck, forget just comic fans, most people. If they came across a way to channel powers, they would attempt it. Frustration would start to settle in quickly, though, I could imagine, when it doesn't work out right away. And that was the interesting thing, is he keeps trying, even though it's not working.
And here's the thing, that it's the guy really kind of, some people will call him a slacker, see, just because he doesn't have the traditional drive that most people would have to get a better job and go on, you get a nice suit job, big money, and all that kind of stuff. He has his own just path, his own way of doing stuff. So you would see him as a slacker, but the amount of time that he put into it and the effort and just how many days, it was like, no, the finger has to be 33 degrees, okay, and this finger has to be 22, and he's really just going into it, studying the stuff and just doing, he paid his dues to, to get what he wanted. I thought that was just a cool thing to show that it wasn't something easy. It wasn't something you could bust a move if you're trying to Vogue or something.
This is a great way to start off, because I connected with that as we read this for escapism, but imagine if it was genuinely possible. That was kind of cool. It also gives some quick insight into Apama before we kick into the prelude to discovering the animal, because rather than going right to his starting point, we see him first trying to be Apama, then we jump back a little bit in his history to see what led him to the point where he'd actually be driven enough to do this. And I thought that was really important to kind of give us a vibe for what Apama's all about first, make it look real cool and say, okay, this guy's going to attempt to get powers, now why would he do this? and that was kind of cool. Dude cannot catch a break. Imagine trying to make ends meet in your ice cream truck business. Actually, in any business, if people steal from you, your bottom line's going to be affected. I gotta imagine this is common in a number of neighborhoods today. In a business where you maximize your profit by driving down a wide radius of neighborhood streets as possible, these kids stiffing him and attacking his truck would further bring him down. At what point do you hit your breaking point? What would make you keep going? What would make you want to change your situation? Because in his case, okay, you're driving down the street and what are you going to start saying now? I can't go down this street, but I can go down that street. How do you make ends meet in that type of business? And yet you have to go back to your boss, because he wasn't his own boss, and you have to show, this is what I have to show for the day, yet the inventory doesn't match obviously his profits. And plus there's obviously some mess and damage to the vehicle because of that. So and he really did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you keep from just going postal on those kids?
Right, and obviously this is a guy who's hit that point where he's very hard to be around and hard to deal with because this has happened to him more than once. Some of it is his own doing, sure, because he's not heavily motivated, but others are because of events around him that he can't help. So he's a hard person to be a friend with. He's a hard and people look at him like he's an outcast a bit, and I kind of like that. This opening was really important because it needed to establish for me a motivation as to why I care, and I want to see what happens to this guy. I love the timeliness of this comic. It's set in Cleveland, and Herb is committed to commenting about LeBron and what was going on there. I thought it was kind of cool to see that little reference to the whole LeBron-James situation. Set a tone that it takes place today and now. It's clear that Ilya is viewed as a deadbeat, like I said, by most around him, but his own sense of self-worth is affected. And in spite of all this, he has a hope for change. And that was something that struck me about the character that I liked and found inspirational, that he still found hope in all this. Because we've all been at that point, it's usually in early college or in high school or at some point in time in your life where you're like, I can't quite find myself. Mm-hmm. And yet he keeps hope. There still has that hope in there, which sometimes you need from the outside in. Instead of the inside out, you need people to kind of help you there. He doesn't have any of that, it seems.
The main character, Iliad, is very visually, he appears to be the actor who played David in the actual movie, Kieran Henderson. And I like just the usage of his likeness in the comic. Just like his girlfriend is the same likeness as the actress who played Robin, Jocelyn Wyosek. I like using that, but it was also...
Because he would be... if it's David writing it, he would be inspired to... you put yourself in the comic and your girlfriend, how cool is that? Right?
Yeah, but it's that same... If you think about from the movie, the positive attitude David had towards... He was so focused on creating this Apama, naturally he's going to put that character, give him that adversity, but give him that continuing on, that perseverance, kind of like, if you think about it, David would see himself having gone through all that to just to get this comic created. So that was one of those things where you didn't need to see the movie to know this, but by seeing the movie, you get a little kind of, it's the Easter egg. I'm like, what's the term for a little special tweak in there? It's a little Easter egg.
You were looking at me like I knew what you were going to say.
I know. Well, come on, we've been doing this long enough. Can't you just read the old mind?
No, your mind's a scary place. I take pride in the fact that I can't. Traditionally, the lion has been known as the king of the jungle. When Ilya comes across a man running through the jungle and collapses, he gets a vision that shows him the truth. The lion is the king because when Apama defeated him, it preferred solitude. I really like mythology in comics, and establishing that this has some sort of historical mythology for the character really has a nice touch. There's a history here. It's an established one for this comic, but I love that. I love that sense of longevity, the sense that something came before. And it leaves open the option to explore, depending on how long this runs, who are other Apamas that came first? How long has this really been going on? And what have they done that we don't know about? And that's an interesting, if this takes off and goes in an interesting direction, there's a lot of open options on things you could really do with this book that I find very cool.
Yeah.
And I like that. It's a pretty wide open story. The artwork, as we see the battle royale for leadership of the jungle, was really sharp. Yeah. I really dug that sequence. The man Ilya saw running with the vision was the dead man in the cave, right?
Yeah, that was kind of a guiding. I kind of took it as like how the Green Lantern picks the next lantern, goes out. But instead of that, he sent out his essence and found the guy who would be the next Apama. Because I'll be honest with you, if I had been the guy who saw the Apama, I don't think I'd be able to go through as much as he went through to get that power. I would have been like, yeah, that's kind of neat. Okay, I can't get it. Let me just read my comic books. I don't think I would have gone through all the trial and tribulation he went through to get that power, not knowing it would work. He still didn't know what would happen.
Well, no, he did. That's not true, because the visions, and he mentioned this, and it was actually something that I really liked. There was an explanation in there that the visions gave him an education and insight into Apama and why the scroll he finds is important. So that was actually something addressed in the comic that I really liked. And it's something I encourage people, actually I read this comic 3 times because I really went through it, and I encourage people to go through and read it a couple of times because there's a lot of depth to this webcomic. And that was one of the cool things that I thought, and there's David mentions, or Ilya, I should say, Ilya mentions in this that there is like this education that he got from the visions themselves. Yeah. And that's what was the driving force, because he knew it would work from the visions. Now, going on what you're saying, he is going on faith
of the
that
visions,
it will work.
Yeah.
But at least it wasn't just a matter of like him finding this scroll and seeing this pose
and thinking. The vision told him what to do. But you think about it, you see a vision, you hear a voice in your head. Are you actually going to think what it says is going to happen? Once again, if that had been me, I probably would have just ignored it as more voices in my head and just probably moved on once I tried it initially. Maybe a couple more tries, it's probably nothing.
What I liked, though, is we saw that it was more than voices in the head. This was a vision. Yeah. And there's a huge difference to that, between like a small voice telling you something where you're kind of like, okay, I can ignore that, this was a hard-hitting, in-depth story that he was told in those visions. And I think that would be something that would take you in a little bit of a different direction. I don't know. It was interesting because I thought it was a different twist to just the voices in the head. This takes us back to the scene from the beginning of the book, and I actually liked the transitions. I liked that they started off with this, and they did it very quickly in the beginning, just as kind of a taste of what's to come. Now we know where we were at the beginning of the book, and he even tells us that, like, now we're back to this point. He takes a lot on faith that this scroll is a major step toward the change he's been looking for. I think that's why it's important to show us why he would need to grasp that dream for change, to show us why he would try so hard to learn, because he got nothing else going on. Yeah. This is to him kind of, if I can do this, this could change everything for me. It could make me into something more. And right now I don't feel like anything else is going to, because everything else I'm trying is just going wrong. It's kind of the grasping at straws. And it's certainly not the easy way out.
No.
Because I'm a big fan of seeing people train on some level when it comes to their powers. Seeing them earn the right to access them versus being just given them. And that's the funny part with, when you were talking about Green Lantern before, I'm like, this is a different twist, because this guy has to earn this. I'm not saying that Hal Jordan doesn't in Green Lantern. He earned it because of, he already had done enough in his life to show that he was worthy.
But even after you get the ring, you still got to learn how to use it, and you still got to learn how to focus your willpower and push aside the fear and overcome all that stuff. So there is, I still like the comparison because there is a lot of training that has to go on with it.
But if you take a look at the guy Hal was prior to getting the ring, he had accomplished a lot in his life already as a test pilot. This guy hasn't. And I like that we take this guy who hasn't really done much to advance his life and put him in a position where now he has to really work hard to advance his life. And it was an interesting message that I got. There was a different little twist. And I liked that. I think what I liked is I like your comparison, but I also like the distinction in Ilya that makes him a little bit different. And Vika, she's not really a girlfriend, but the girl that he knows.
I took it that they were a girlfriend.
No, not the way. They never identified her as a girlfriend. She was the girl who happens to work in that place and didn't really have. When did they ever identify her as a girlfriend?
Well, I don't ever remember them saying, but I kind of just. Well, I'm probably assuming just because of the appearance, the likeness of Robin, David's girlfriend in the movie. So but I when I was reading it, I took it that she was a more than just a friend.
No, because they didn't even. I didn't even take that they were friends. The way that their interaction nothing implied that they were. Because Vika's hysterical. She has this great sense of humor, very similar to the character from the film. And I really needed this to keep me the mood balanced, because the story was very dark up to this point. And when those sequences started hitting there, it started to get funny again. But she says the kind of things that everyone would like to in certain situations, especially when she walks in on Ilya with his crazy poses. She thinks he's into some strange stuff, and it made me chuckle. And the bowling alley bit with him doing more of this publicly was also laughed. But when she walked in on him there was nothing to indicate that there was any kind of friendship or anything other than she knew who this guy was. Totally caught it differently than you did. I applaud the creators for putting these moments in. These chances to smile at the book came at just the right time. Just to jump back again to the webcomic interface real quick, I loved that the various advertisements in the book open up in a new window versus clicking on them and taking you out of the comic. That would have annoyed me to tears, but you can check out the various ads. Like the Bizarros, for example, was the T-shirt one of the boys was wearing. I love there was an ad for the band in there. Yeah. But again, you can feel free to click on these things and check them out and jump right back into the comic without losing your place. And I thought that was something that was a really cool distinction. I wish more websites would operate the way this interface did in this comic book, because I really thought it was very intuitive for that reason. I'm getting more into webcomics, and when I find I love the story and the interface is intuitive, I'll keep coming back for more. If the interface is annoying, that distracts my reading enjoyment, and it keeps me from wanting to come back to the book. So I thought it was something important to notice, seeing as we're dealing with a different sort of medium than we usually talk about on the show. Ilya finally gets the powers to work when he puts on the costume, but even more importantly, I think that he's finally able to let his subconscious mind take over. I kind of get the vibe that he was trying so hard that he was psyching himself out a bit, and I really liked that I was trying to figure out what he was doing wrong. Like, as I was watching him, like, dude, what's dude messing up on? I don't get it. It gave me the sense that once his body relaxed and embraced Apama, he was able to connect with it. Because it was really that moment where everything started to click, and I like that. I am glad that he doesn't instantly know how to be a hero and makes those early mistakes, because those were some things that I really digged about the character. He thinks that this is a dream on some level, as one would. It actually goes back a lot to what point you made earlier about the voices in your head. He was going on everything based on this vision. When it actually starts to work out, he thinks he's having a vision again.
Yeah, it's still a dream. It's still, it's something else going on. And that was something I kind of connected to, and I liked that, because I know if I had the option to do something superhuman, your first reaction is this a dream? Because I have those dreams where you can fly and do all types of superhero freaky deaky stuff, and I usually realize it's a dream, and that's when I will wake up or something. But that was something I was like, okay, yeah, this is going through it. Now we're gonna have a couple what's down the pipeline. We'll get some kind of like quote unquote training sequences as he gets used to what the deal is. Hopefully we're gonna see his arch nemesis coming up soon. We'll see some villain action. We'll see him doing some stuff. Or to be honest, it may completely swerve, and it could be Ilya now with this power has a new confidence. Maybe he, as a person, will change because of Apama. So it's the whole thing. It's getting the powers was just the beginning of what some of the cool exploration they can do with this character. And because you're seeing it and you're showing that it's just one of us, a regular, everyday, average guy who got these powers. This isn't a disciplined billionaire who's been training his whole life or anything like that. This is just a regular, average, everyday guy who now has this, who's unlocked this door, and who knows where it's actually going to go to.
He can talk to animals, but isn't sure what to make of it, which I thought was kind of cool. He tries to save the screaming girl, but finds out fast she's actually on the set of Flaming Carrot the movie.
Yeah.
Nice nod to the cool indie comic, Flaming Carrot Comics, and it was kind of cool to see that. I gotta say that this was the point where, as someone who watched Hero Tomorrow the film, I really started to think this had a cool thematic connection. With the way Ilya was behaving, Vika's vibe, you're right, she has that confidence and everything. I didn't get the relationship vibe between them that you did. But I will say this, addressing whether you're right or I'm right, doesn't matter. I do think we're in agreement that this is going to be a friend, a romantic interest. Yes. It's going to lead to that.
Ongoing.
I guess I was taking it more that we're going to see that from ground zero develop versus we're already being jumped into the relationship. But maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what happens. That was interesting to see there. The nods to the comics and the comic book shop, like Flaming Carrot, for example, from the film, it started to feel like David wrote this. David from the film wrote this. And those little things were something that I found was a really cool connection and expanded the film. I can't recommend this enough to be enjoyed with after watching the film or before watching the film. Like if this comic is your first exposure to the Hero Tomorrow world, go watch the film because the film's very cool and I love that connection. They add another sense of depth to the story.
With the talking to the animals, there's just something that I really liked how the different animals had different personalities, and it wasn't just a across the board, this is the animals, they think like us. No, they're going to have their own specifics, their own direct attention, what they're going to deal with. The cat was very me. The raccoon was on the defensive because, raccoons are always there, kind of being shaken out and scared out, and it's, going, okay, what's going on? And then he gets to the rat, and you would think, oh, a rat. No, rats are actually very intelligent creatures. They have pretty good memories. Just through testing, you can see that they actually are able to do some deductive reasoning kind of stuff. So when he was talking to the rat was able to make full sentences and was able to actually have kind of like an interaction with him. And I was like looking forward to seeing him deal with the rat kind of like in a, I don't want to say an Alfred, but maybe just that confident. Maybe he's going to be sitting there just jaw jacking with his rat. I'm kind of looking forward to that part of it as well.
It's funny, one of the things I did put in my notes when I was thinking about this is the cliffhanger with the rat. I could see Liza becoming his possible Alfred and all this, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Because the story ends off with this encounter with a cat that seems to want nothing to do with him, and Ilya heading home. And he's glad he connected with the powers, and that sense of accomplishment is his first step towards climbing the ladder towards turning his life around. And I agree with you that this person's going to be his confidant. I guess that's why even more so I thought that Vika wasn't there in the relationship yet. Liza's going to be the confidant, at least at first, until he gets to the point in the relationship with Vika where maybe he can actually talk to Vika about this. Because my question is Vika going to know about Apama or not? I don't know.
Yeah, not initially. Yeah, initially, he's going to probably keep it to himself.
What felt different about this is that he isn't instantly a hero. Sure, he has powers, but he's really clueless how to put it all together. This journey feels real. It's not about waving a magic wand and your life getting fixed. It's about real hard work and growing up that is needed to move forward. And we've all been there. It's about finding your sense of purpose and making that life happen the right way. I have a feeling that Ilya's journey towards this will not be simple. He feels human and still has those faults, and I'm curious to see how this is going to play out in future issues. There's a ton more to see in the issue and explore in this comic, but I want to note the real cool write-up about Harvey Pekar and his relationship with the Hero Tomorrow film that is at the end of this issue. Do yourself a favor and read it. I thought it was very cool because Harvey Pekar was one of the voices in the film, and I loved how that little nod went at the end. The whole experience I thought was great, from advertisements to... As a webcomic goes, I really found this to be an enjoyable experience and recommend it highly as something to check out yourself and see.
Yeah, and we got to give a big congratulations, because we never said this, to Spain for winning the 2010 World Cup. The artist is from Spain, so they actually let him do a little kind of tribute and celebration for their victory, and I thought that was absolutely wonderful what he did in the comic. I'm not going to say what, because pick it up and see it and read it for yourself. It was a neat thing.
One of the cool things that I liked about this, and actually you just hit on it right here, the creators let you kind of into them. There's a lot of personality into this story and a lot of connecting with the audience. As a reader, I find that really important when I'm getting into a new comic, especially in the independent world. One of the things I like about reading independent comics, something that's new and fresh, is I like feeling like I'm in the know, that I'm becoming friends with the people that are putting this together. And they really went out of their way to try to connect with their audience while crafting a great story that's worth coming back for. And I hope this is something that will drum up a lot of attention. I hope that a lot of people will check out Hero Tomorrow. It's free. Then go check the film out, because the film's very cool as well. And that's the great part is the comic is completely different from the film in the sense that this is the comic that was in the film. Yeah. Which I love. That's totally cool, because it's two very different experiences. I would be curious if any of our listeners have the opportunity to check this out and then do watch the film afterwards. I would love for people to call in with what their experience was like that, because I watched the film first, so I can't even comment on what that would be like, because we read the comic after the fact. So I'd love to see what your experience was on the flip side, and how you connected to the film, if it made the film any different for you having read the comic first.
Well, I jumped in my time bubble and took the digital comic back to myself before I read it and got the notes from, the previous version.
And you said you're afraid of the voices in your head?
Hey, I listened to some of them, and not all of them.
Apparently. But that's HeroTomorrow.com. Check out that comic. We are proudly sponsored by DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. DCBService.com every month has deals up to 75% off on brand new material, which is wonderful and amazing. So I want to check out DCBService.com. We're at the end of the month of August right now, and as the beginning of September kicks off, you're going to be seeing some of the amazing deals you can find over at DCBService.com. Thank you for your continued sponsorship of the show. InStockTrades.com is your trade paperback and hardcover source. Be sure to check them out. And remember, orders of over $50 or more give you free shipping, which is wonderful with the deals that they've already got over there. A lot of the trade paperbacks and hardcovers are going for 35% off and even more. So definitely check out InStockTrades.com for those great deals. Want to remind everyone to check out HeroInitiative.org. If you're not already supporting the Hero Initiative, please consider doing that. It's a great charity that is helping the creators of yesterday who are in need today. These are the people that laid the groundwork for a lot of the wonderful comics and material that we are enjoying today, and that's HeroInitiative.org. We will be at the New York Comic Con. It's October 8th through the 10th. That's nycomiccon.com. Check out the amazing guest list that's constantly updated. And it's just a wonderful convention. If you haven't been there, we're going to be in the podcast arena. And we're really excited to be a part of that wonderful event again at the New York Comic Con. And don't forget to check out ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. Our podcast is always put up each week over at Get Your Geek On Radio. That's GetYourGeekOnRadio.com. A radio station committed to making geek chic. I hope everyone enjoyed this special bonus episode. I want to thank once again Ted Sikora for joining us, and I want to congratulate once again the wonderful team behind Hero Tomorrow for putting that great movie together, and of course the brand new webcomic, which is really fantastic. So check that out at HeroTomorrow.com, and we will be back with our next episode in a few days. We're already in production on working on that next show. So I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. Jim and I would like to do something like this a little bit more often, periodically, hopefully at least quarterly. We could do more spotlight episodes like this that step a little outside and release them as a bonus feature, not in place of our regular show, but as a bonus feature for fans who've been, kind enough to enjoy and following our show, to get something a little bit of a different flavor from Raging Bullets. So hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we will see you in a few days with our new show.
Bye!